The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the package Alexis had dropped off late the previous night. It was small, wrapped in brown paper, and taped tightly. The address he'd given me was written on a sticky note stuck to the top. I didn't dare open it, but my mind raced with questions. What was inside? Drugs? Money? Something worse? I wanted to throw it away, to burn it and tell Alexis I couldn't go through with it. But the image of him holding his phone up, showing me the damning photo, was burned into my mind. If Charles ever saw it, no, I couldn't risk it. With shaky hands, I picked up the package and placed it in my bag. Driving to the address felt like walking to my own execution. It was a small apartment complex on the other side of town, the kind of place where no one asked questions. I parked outside and sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. You're just dropping it off, I told myself. In and out. Then it's over. When I finally worked up the nerve, I got out of the car and walked to the door with the number Alexis had given me. I knocked once, my heart pounding in my chest. The door creaked open, and a man I didn't recognize peered out. His face was rough, his eyes cold and calculating. "You got something for me?" he asked, his voice gruff. I nodded and handed him the package, avoiding his gaze. "Alexis sent me," I said quickly. The man grunted and took the package without a word. As he shut the door, I turned and practically ran back to my car. My hands were shaking so badly that I struggled to start the engine. When I got home, I collapsed onto the couch, my head spinning. What had I just done? What was I becoming? I thought about calling Alexis and demanding answers, but the thought of hearing his smug voice made me sick. Instead, I sat there, trying to convince myself that this would be the last time. The message from Alexis haunted me all night. "Let's talk tomorrow. I have another favor." His words echoed in my mind as I lay in bed, unable to sleep. I felt like a puppet, and Alexis was the one pulling the strings. How had I allowed myself to get so deep into this mess? Every time I thought about confronting him, the same fear stopped me. The photo, the threats, the knowledge that he could destroy my life with a single move. The next day, Alexis didn't wait long before calling me. I stared at my phone, my stomach churning, before reluctantly answering. "Mia," he said smoothly, as if we were old friends. "I knew you'd come through. That's what I like about you. You're reliable." "What do you want now?" I asked, my voice trembling. I didn't even try to hide the frustration and fear in my tone. He laughed softly. "Relax. It's nothing too crazy this time. Just a little favor for a friend." "A favor?" I repeated bitterly. "Like the last one? Alexis, I can't keep doing this." "You can, and you will," he said sharply, his tone hardening. "Unless you want Charles to know the truth. Do I need to remind you what's at stake here?" I stayed silent, gripping the phone so tightly that my hand hurt. "That's what I thought," he continued. "This time, I need you to move some money for me. Don't worry, I'll explain exactly what to do. All you have to do is follow my instructions." That evening, I found myself sitting at my computer, staring at an email from Alexis with detailed steps for transferring funds from one account to another. He had sent me the login information and everything I needed, like he had planned this all along. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, shaking. I didn't want to do this. It felt wrong, illegal, dangerous. But what choice did I have? If I refused, he would expose everything. The affair, the pregnancy, the fact that my son wasn't Charles's. The thought of Charles finding out made me feel physically sick. I couldn't let that happen. With tears streaming down my face, I typed in the information and made the transfer. When it was done, I sat back in my chair, numb. I had just committed a crime for Alexis, and there was no turning back. Alexis's message haunted me all night. You and I make a great team, don't you think? He didn't just see me as someone to blackmail. He saw me as his pawn, someone he could use whenever and however he pleased. I knew then that he would never stop. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. If I didn't do something soon, Alexis would destroy everything I had left. The next morning, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. She was exhausted, broken, and terrified. But somewhere deep inside me, a spark of defiance flickered. I couldn't keep living like this. If Alexis wanted to play games, I would have to beat him at his own. That day, I reached out to my old college friend, Clara. Clara was one of the smartest people I knew, and she worked in cybersecurity. She had helped me with tech issues in the past, and I hoped she could help me now, without asking too many questions. When we met at a cafe later that afternoon, Clara greeted me with a warm smile. "Mia, it's been ages. How are you?" "I've been better," I admitted, trying to keep my voice steady. "Clara, I need your help with something private." Her expression shifted to concern. "Of course. What's going on?" I hesitated, my heart pounding. I couldn't tell her everything. Not about the affair, not about Alexis. "There's someone harassing me," I said carefully. "He's been sending me messages, and I think he's tracking my phone and computer. I need to find a way to stop him." Clara nodded slowly, her brows furrowing. "That's serious, Mia. Do you have any evidence of what he's doing?" "I have messages," I said, pulling out my phone and showing her some of Alexis's texts. I avoided the most incriminating ones, but shared enough to convey the threat. Clara's eyes narrowed as she read them. "This guy is dangerous," she said. "But you're lucky. There's a lot we can do. First, we'll secure your devices and make sure he can't spy on you anymore. Then, we'll gather enough evidence to take this to the authorities." Her words gave me hope, but they also filled me with dread. Involving the authorities would mean exposing everything, including my betrayal of Charles. Could I really go that far? As I left the cafe, my phone buzzed with another message from Alexis. "I hope you're not thinking of doing anything stupid, Mia. Remember, I know everything." My breath caught as I realized the risk I was taking. If Alexis found out what I was planning, he wouldn't just ruin my life. He might ruin Charles's too. Clara worked faster than I could have imagined. By the end of the next day, she had installed security software on my devices and removed any trackers Alexis might have planted. "You're safe for now," she told me confidently. "But you need to be careful. This guy won't back off easily." Her words echoed in my mind as I walked back to my car. Alexis wasn't the type to let go of his control without a fight. The only way to truly free myself was to gather enough evidence to expose him. But that came with its own risks. If I exposed Alexis, I would have to expose my affair too. Could I handle losing Charles, the only stability I had left? That night, I sat in my darkened living room, scrolling through Alexis's old messages. Threats, demands, veiled insults. They were all there. My fingers hovered over the delete button, but instead, I started saving the most incriminating ones. Clara had been clear. I needed proof. And as much as I hated to admit it, I needed leverage against Alexis. The next day, Alexis called me. His voice was calm, almost casual, but I could sense the undertone of control. "Mia, I need you to pick something up for me tomorrow. Same as last time, but a different location. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my voice steady. Alexis, I can't keep doing this. You don't have a choice, he snapped, his tone sharp. You know what's at stake. I took a shaky breath, my heart pounding. Fine. Send me the details. After the call ended, I messaged Clara. I need you to track something for me. It's risky, but I have no other choice. She responded almost immediately. I've got your back. Tell me what you need. The plan was simple but dangerous. I would follow Alexis's instructions to pick up the package, but Clara would be monitoring my phone to track any digital trails. If Alexis had ties to anything illegal, Clara would find it. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. But as I prepared for the pickup, doubt crept in. What if Alexis caught on? What if this plan backfired? And worst of all, what if Charles found out before I could fix everything? As I drove to the meeting spot, my phone buzzed with a new message from Alexis. Be careful, Mia. I'll know if you try anything stupid. My hands tightened on the wheel, and I realized just how dangerous this game had become. The meeting spot Alexis had chosen was on the edge of town, a quiet industrial area with abandoned warehouses and very few people around. As I pulled into the desolate parking lot, I felt the weight of Clara's tracker on my phone. She was monitoring everything from her end, ready to collect any digital trails Alexis left behind. But even with Clara's help, my nerves were on edge. I couldn't shake the feeling that something would go wrong. The package was waiting for me inside a rusty shipping container, just as Alexis had described. I hesitated before stepping out of the car. The parking lot was eerily silent, and every sound, my footsteps on the gravel, the creak of the container door, seemed magnified. Inside, I found the package, a small, unassuming black box. What was in it? Drugs? Money? Evidence of something far worse. I didn't dare open it. As I returned to my car, I saw headlights approaching. My heart stopped. Alexis had warned me to follow his instructions to the letter, and I knew I was being watched. I slid into the driver's seat, clutching the package tightly, and started the engine. I called Clara as I drove back. I've got it, I said, my voice shaking. Did you find anything? I'm tracking the phone numbers and IP addresses connected to Alexis's messages, she replied. This guy has layers of fake accounts and proxies, but I'm digging through them. Just hold on a little longer, Mia. We're getting closer. But Alexis wasn't one to let me off that easily. As I neared home, my phone buzzed. Pull over, the message read. I froze. Was he watching me? The thought sent chills down my spine. Moments later, another message appeared. Now. I pulled over onto the side of a quiet street, my hands trembling. A dark SUV appeared behind me, and Alexis stepped out. He walked to my car with the casual confidence of someone who knew he was in control. Good work, he said as I rolled down the window. Give me the package. I handed it over without a word, my heart pounding. He inspected it briefly before looking back at me, his expression unreadable. You didn't open it, did you? No, I lied. I hadn't opened it, but I had been tempted. Alexis leaned closer, his voice low and dangerous. Good. Because if I ever find out you're not following the rules, Mia, you'll regret it. Remember, I'm always watching. As he walked away, I realized just how deep I was in, and that Alexis was starting to suspect me. The encounter with Alexis left me shaken. His words, I'm always watching, played over and over in my mind, making it impossible to think straight. I knew he was growing more suspicious. He could feel my resistance, my hesitation, and it was only a matter of time before he uncovered my plan. I called Clara as soon as I got home, locking myself in the bedroom to avoid raising suspicion with my son. Clara, he's on to me, I said, my voice trembling. I don't think I can keep this up much longer. Mia, listen to me, she said firmly. We're close. I tracked the activity tied to his messages, and he's definitely involved in something big. Money laundering, illegal shipments. He's using you as part of a larger operation. Her words made my blood run cold. But we need one final push. If you can get him to slip up just once, we'll have enough to take him down. How? I whispered, clutching the phone. How do I make him slip up without him realizing? We bait him, Clara said simply. The next time he asks you to deliver or transfer something, stall him. Make him impatient. When people like Alexis lose control, they get careless. That's when we catch them. The next day, Alexis sent me another message. I need you to make another transfer. Same method, different account. Don't mess this up. I stared at the screen, knowing this was my chance to set him up. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, typing a reply. I can't do it right now. I need more time. His response came within seconds. What do you mean, more time? Do it now. I'm at the store with my son, I lied, trying to keep my tone casual. I'll do it when I get home. I could almost hear the rage in his reply. You don't get to delay, Mia. You follow my orders, or Charles finds out everything. For the first time, I felt a flicker of power. I knew he couldn't expose me without risking himself, and that gave me a sliver of courage. I stalled him for hours, pretending to be too busy to complete the task. By the time I finally made the transfer, Clara was ready on her end. She had tracked every step of the transaction, linking it directly to Alexis's offshore accounts. Later that evening, Clara called me, her voice urgent. Mia, you did it. We've got enough evidence to turn him in, but there's a problem. My heart stopped. Alexis is onto you. He's been watching your every move, and I think he knows what you're doing. I didn't sleep that night. Clara's warning echoed in my head. Alexis is onto you. I felt as though the walls were closing in, and every sound outside my house sent my heart racing. By morning, my worst fears were confirmed. Alexis was waiting for me when I stepped outside to take my son to school. He leaned casually against his black SUV, arms crossed, his dark eyes locked onto mine. The moment I saw him, I froze. Morning, Mia, he said smoothly, though his tone carried an icy edge. What are you doing here? I managed to say, trying to sound calm, even as my pulse thundered in my ears. He smiled, that smug, dangerous smile that had haunted me for months. We need to talk. Alone. I looked at my son, who was standing by my side, oblivious to the tension in the air. I have to drop him at school, I said quickly. Alexis nodded, his gaze unwavering. I'll wait. After I dropped my son off, I drove to a nearby park where Alexis followed close behind. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that they ached. I didn't know what he was planning, but I could feel the weight of his anger pressing down on me. When I parked, he got out of his SUV and motioned for me to join him. I reluctantly stepped out, my legs trembling. What do you want, Alexis? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I want the truth, he said, his voice low and dangerous. What are you up to, Mia? Don't play dumb with me. I know you've been stalling, and I know someone's helping you. I opened my mouth to deny it, but his sharp glare silenced me. You think you're smart, don't you? He continued, stepping closer. You think you can outplay me? I backed away instinctively, my heart racing. I don't know what you're talking about, I said weakly, but he wasn't buying it. You've been digging into my business, haven't you? He spat. You've been trying to set me up. Who's helping you, Mia? Who? Before I could answer, Alexis grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "If you think you can betray me, you're dead wrong," he hissed. "You'll regret this, Mia. I'll make sure of it." As his words sank in, I realized that this wasn't just a game anymore. Alexis was willing to destroy me, and possibly worse, if I didn't act fast. As Alexis's grip tightened on my arm, I felt something inside me snap. For months, I had lived under his control, letting him manipulate and blackmail me. But I couldn't do it anymore. Not for him, not for myself, and certainly not for my son. I yanked my arm free, glaring at him with a resolve I didn't know I had. "Do your worst, Alexis," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm done. You can threaten me, blackmail me, and ruin my life, but I'm not going to let you control me anymore." For a moment, Alexis seemed stunned. He wasn't used to me fighting back. Then his expression darkened. "You think you're brave now?" he sneered. "Do you have any idea what I can do to you, Mia? To your family?" "I do," I shot back, my heart pounding. "But I also know what I can do to you. I've been collecting everything. The texts, the transfers, the packages. I know all about your offshore accounts and your illegal deals. You think you can ruin me? I can take you down with me." Alexis stepped back, his confident demeanor faltering for the first time. "You wouldn't," he said, though his voice lacked its usual edge. "Try me," I said, holding my ground. I didn't have to bluff. Clara had already given me enough evidence to turn Alexis's world upside down. "It's over, Alexis. Walk away now, or I'll make sure the authorities know exactly what you've been up to." The tension between us was electric, the silence stretching for what felt like hours. Finally, Alexis took a step back, his smirk returning, though it looked forced. "You've got guts, Mia," he said quietly. "I'll give you that, but don't think this is over." He turned and walked away, leaving me trembling but victorious. I got back into my car, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. It was over, or at least I hoped it was. Later that evening, I met with Clara. Together, we finalized the report, handing over everything to the authorities. I couldn't risk Alexis coming back into my life, and Clara assured me that with the evidence we had, he wouldn't be able to wriggle out of this. When I got home, I sat down with Charles, the man I had betrayed but still loved deeply. It was time to tell him the truth. About the affair, about Alexis, about everything. My heart broke as I watched his face crumble with hurt and betrayal. "I'm so sorry, Charles," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I made a terrible mistake, and I've been paying for it ever since. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know the truth." For a long moment, Charles said nothing. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" "Because I was scared," I admitted. "Scared of losing you. Scared of what Alexis would do." Charles stood up, running a hand through his hair. "I need time," he said finally. "I don't know if I can get past this, Mia, but I'm glad you told me the truth." Weeks later, news broke that Alexis had been arrested for fraud and money laundering. His empire crumbled, and for the first time in months, I felt free. But the cost of my freedom was heavy. Charles and I were still together, but things weren't the same. The trust we had built was shattered, and I didn't know if we could ever rebuild it. As I watched our son play in the backyard, I realized that my mistakes would always haunt me. But I also knew that I had a chance to make things right. For myself, for my son, and maybe even for Charles. My story wasn't over, but for now, I could finally breathe again. Life after Alexis's arrest was quieter, but far from simple. The headlines blared with his downfall for weeks. businessman caught in major fraud scandal. Revealed. Alexis and his web of deceit. Every time I saw his name on the news, it felt like a small victory, but also a painful reminder of the mistakes I had made. I focused on keeping things as normal as possible for my son. At only 3 years old, he didn't understand what was happening, but I could see the confusion in his little eyes every time I cried or stared blankly at the television. I had to be strong for him, even when I felt like crumbling. Charles and I were trying. We still sat at the dinner table together, still exchanged polite words, but the warmth we once shared was gone. He moved like a ghost in our home, present but distant. Every glance from him felt like a reminder of what I'd done, and though he never yelled or accused, I could feel the weight of his pain in the silence. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry, Charles came into the room. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching me, before finally speaking. "I've been thinking a lot, Mia." I stopped what I was doing and turned to face him, my heart pounding. "And?" I asked softly, bracing for what he might say. "I still don't know if I can forgive you," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "But I know I want to try, for our son's sake, and maybe for ours too." His words brought tears to my eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes, Charles. I'll earn your trust again, no matter how long it takes." "We'll see," he said quietly, but there was a flicker of hope in his eyes. It wasn't a promise, but it was a chance. Months passed, and while Charles and I worked through our strained relationship, I also began to rebuild myself. Therapy became my refuge, a place to face my guilt and make peace with the choices that had brought me to this point. My therapist often reminded me that while I couldn't change the past, I could control what came next. The small victories became my milestones. Taking my son to the park without feeling like the world was watching me. Laughing at one of Charles's rare jokes, even if it felt bittersweet. Watching my son run into his father's arms and knowing, despite everything, Charles loved him completely. One rainy evening, Charles and I sat on the couch, watching our son draw pictures on the coffee table. I glanced at Charles, who was staring at our boy with a small, sad smile. "Do you ever think we'll get past this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Charles didn't look at me right away, but when he did, his expression was thoughtful. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know I want to try. You're the mother of my child, Mia. That means something." His words weren't a declaration of love or forgiveness, but they were a step forward. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we could build something new. As I tucked my son into bed that night, he looked up at me and said, "Mommy, are you happy?" I hesitated, thinking of everything I had lost and everything I was still fighting for. "I'm getting there," I said, kissing his forehead. "And one day, I will be." The journey wasn't over. The scars of the past would never fully fade, but I was determined to create a future where I could hold my head high again. Alexis was gone, his shadow no longer looming over my life. Now it was time to rebuild. Not just my marriage, but myself.